Ferrari is undergoing yet another internal restructuring, and this particular occasion involves a crucial department, specifically the 2026 power unit. Indeed, two prominent individuals associated with the forthcoming regulations and the Ferrari 2026 initiative will be departing. Let's now take a detailed look at who is involved and what the consequences are for Ferrari. But not only that, we also need to see Prost's statements about Hamilton, what Leclerc said about the Baku race. Let's look at Verstappen's statements about Christian Horner and the work of Laurent Mekies, because they have sparked a lot of discussion. Then we'll also see the Williams protest and Stefano Domenicali's rejection of a new team. Before we begin, please make sure to leave a supportive like, subscribe and activate notifications so you don't miss any news about Formula 1 and Ferrari. With that being stated, let's commence immediately. As per Autoracer.it, Maranello is on the verge of saying goodbye to two pivotal individuals. The initial significant departure pertains to Wolf Zimmermann, the head of the 2026 power unit. Zimmermann, who is German, had been associated with Ferrari for a duration of 11 years and was appointed to lead the engine project in 2023. Thus, he was at the forefront of advancing the new hybrid unit that is scheduled to make its debut in the upcoming year. The rumor has him close to Mattia Binotto to join the Audi Formula 1 project, which will officially enter the World Championship in 2026. The second significant loss is Lars Schmidt, the chief engineer responsible for the development of the internal combustion component. According to circulating rumors, he is also gravitating towards Audi. In this context, we are discussing the thermal core aspect of the engine, a component that, with the upcoming regulations, will be required to coexist harmoniously with an electrical system that will constitute 50% of the overall power output. In other terms, two pivotal figures of the forthcoming generation of Ferrari's engines are at risk of working contrary to the team as soon as 2026. This presents a significant issue, not due to Ferrari's shortage of other talented engineers, but because these are individuals who possess an in-depth understanding of Ferrari's internal philosophy. They are familiar with the technical decisions and the developmental trajectory of the project. Observing them transition to a direct competitor such as Audi signifies relinquishing invaluable expertise to a rival that will promptly strive to expand in the forthcoming regulatory cycle. However, there is a downside. All the responsibility now falls on the shoulders of Enrico Gualtieri, who will have free rein and full authority over the 2026 power unit. A choice that brings continuity, since Gualtieri is already involved in the project, but at the same time increases the pressure. Much of Ferrari's future will depend on him, because the point is clear. In 2026, whoever gets the power unit right can ensure years of dominance, as Mercedes did in 2014. And it's no coincidence that in the paddock there's already talk of Mercedes having an advantage in developing the new engine. Frédéric Vasseur was explicit at Monza, emphasizing that Ferrari is concentrating on the year 2026. The same applies to other teams such as Red Bull, Mercedes, Audi, and Honda. Practically everyone has already halted the updates for the year 2025 to progress with the forthcoming technical cycle. This dual setback serves as a substantial wake-up call. Following a disappointing year in 2025, Ferrari simply cannot afford to be delayed for the upcoming regulations. Moreover, if Zimmermann and Schmitz indeed transition to Audi, Maranello will need to ensure the stability of the remaining technical team and implement corrective actions. Not only that, but it will also have to protect its own know-how, because losing talent is one thing, handing it over to a direct competitor is another. Essentially, 2026 risks being a true showdown. Whoever comes prepared with the appropriate power unit has the potential to initiate a victorious cycle. And if Mercedes solidifies its advantage and Audi succeeds in expanding rapidly thanks to these strategic acquisitions, Ferrari simply cannot afford to make any errors. Taking into account that in the upcoming year, the most substantial transformation will occur with the 2026 power units, the departure of engineers such as Zimmermann and Smith represents a considerable setback for Ferrari. Why compete with Mercedes, which isn't facing any setbacks in its engine department and is already known to be ahead in development? Red Bull will likely face the biggest challenges with the new Red Bull powertrains engine, developed internally by Red Bull, but this strategy will be beneficial for them in the long run, because they will be able to have the entire product in-house and they won't have to rely on third parties for the engines, also because aerodynamics and power unit development go hand in hand. If you have a car with certain aerodynamics, you want the engine developed in a specific way to adapt it optimally. And Red Bull understood this, a little late, but they understood it. Therefore, for Ferrari, this loss is significant because these two engineers will go to Audi to develop Audi in the future, which wants to become competitive again in Formula 1. The question naturally arises as to how the contacts between Zimmermann and Smith with Audi came about. Could Mattia Binotto have acted as an intermediary, or was there direct contact between Audi and these engineers? The fact that they are German engineers going to the parent team in Germany, namely Audi, which is part of the Volkswagen Group, is not a coincidence. This underscores once again how central the location of the headquarters and the international contacts a team has are, as they also impact the internal ecosystem of the team. That said, let's also hear Prost's statements about Lewis Hamilton. The 2025 season was supposed to be a revival for Ferrari. With the arrival of Lewis Hamilton, we then saw that the partnership has not taken off so far, and the lowest point came before the summer break when Hamilton even described himself as useless. Subsequently, we observed the error at Zandvoort following the summer break, which resulted in an early retirement and a 5-place grid penalty at Monza due to the failure to adhere to the double yellow flags. At the Italian Grand Prix, something notable shifted. Hamilton started 10th and finished 6th, showing more confidence with the SF25. Boosted by the fans' support, this result was inevitable. But the criticisms have not been lacking. At 40, many are beginning to wonder if the talent that made him one of the greatest has faded. However, a significant voice, Alain Prost, has dispelled these doubts. The 4-time world champion and former Ferrari driver from the years 1990 and 1991 defended the British driver in an interview with L'Equipe. He stated that when you achieve victory with Ferrari, it is more rewarding than with any other team, but when you fail to succeed, it is more disappointing than with any other team. I absolutely do not believe that Lewis Hamilton's talent has diminished or worse been lost. And these words obviously give pause for thought because Prost is well acquainted with the dynamics of Maranello. He knows what it means to drive with the weight of the prancing horse on his shoulders, and his phrase perfectly sums up the situation Hamilton is experiencing at Ferrari. Within this particular team, everything is significantly amplified. Therefore, Hamilton remains an unblemished champion. The issue is not his speed, but rather adapting to a car that does not yet communicate in his language. Let me explain clearly. Hamilton has never adapted to ground effect cars. He has shown this since 2022, where he was outperformed even by Russell. The SF25 is a project born with many limitations, and for a driver who has driven a Mercedes for years that was initially tailor-made but then became undrivable, the transition during the ground effect era is brutal. At 40 years old, you can't afford to waste time adapting. You need a winning package that immediately suits your driving style. Talent, therefore, does not disappear, and Prost is right. Lewis can still make a difference, but Ferrari needs to provide him with a competitive car. If in 2026 with the new regulations Ferrari is at the front, Hamilton could still write historic pages. However, if this Ferrari remains, we risk remembering his move to Maranello as a great missed opportunity. Objectively speaking, we observe inherent structural limitations in this SF25. The understeer issue persists as chronic, and while the modification of the rear suspension has somewhat expanded the setup window, it hasn't resolved the fundamental problems. Furthermore, there's the matter of the floor, about which Ferrari remains silent, and Leclerc has evaluated Ferrari's present situation. Ferrari departed from Monza without achieving the podium finish that the fans had been dreaming of. Charles Leclerc concluded the race in 4th place following a commendable performance, while Hamilton advanced to 6th position from the 10th spot on the grid. Nevertheless, the SF25 reaffirmed its inherent structural limitations, which even the extremely low-drag setup specifically prepared for Monza was unable to conceal. With the home Grand Prix behind them, Maranello now looks forward. The racing calendar currently leads to Baku and Singapore, 2 circuits that have historically been advantageous for Ferrari. Leclerc is confident that there, and additionally in Las Vegas, the team can potentially close the gap with the very best. Baku is a track that I really like, and in the past I have been strong there, declared Leclerc. Singapore is unique and qualifying is very important there. That's why I think in those races we might be closer, but we won't come as one of the 2 favored teams. A clear and realistic statement. Charles hides. McLaren is the leading force in the championship almost everywhere, and when it isn't, there's always Verstappen ready to take advantage. Ferrari today has to contend with both. According to Leclerc, the team will approach the upcoming races as the 3rd force with the possibility of reaching the podium only if Red Bull encounters problems, but victory is out of reach. If Red Bull encounters difficulties, we might be the 2nd force, but we will never be the 1st. It will still be complicated. Also because Frédéric Vasseur confirmed in Monza that there will be no new developments and stated only different wings based on the load required by the circuits, but the cars will remain the same until the end of the season. Baku, Singapore and Las Vegas could bring satisfaction, perhaps a podium or a victory if all the stars align, but the real focus is 2026. Ferrari needs to be ready with a car that is finally up to par. The devoted fans may still be able to endure a disappointing 2025, but they cannot accept another regulatory cycle that begins belatedly. This is a clear representation of Ferrari's current situation, as articulated by Leclerc. A Ferrari that can perform well in Baku, Singapore and Las Vegas, tracks that are quite different from each other, but where it's important to have good top speed, especially in Baku and Las Vegas, while in Singapore it's important to be strong in qualifying and make good use of the curbs, where Red Bull struggles a bit more. Once at the front, it becomes much easier to manage tyres effectively, but it's crucial to prepare the setup well in advance and ensure a good ride height to handle the many bumps on the track. I think about the various bumps. A track like Baku, which is full of bumps, being a city circuit, it will be important to develop a tailored setup. But let's also hear what Verstappen said about Laurent Mekies and Christian Horner. Max Verstappen achieved his 66th career victory. There, a fan from Monza with a Red Bull that's finally more competitive. The achievement is indeed genuine. It occurred on a circuit with minimal downforce that posed a significant challenge to McLaren and brought attention to the RB21. However, the advancement is clearly noticeable. Already at Zandvoort, Verstappen had demonstrated promising signs, applying pressure on Norris and Piastri in a manner he hadn't exhibited in several months. This development, according to the Dutchman, has a specific name and surname, Laurent Mekies. In his own words, there is also a subtle jab directed at the former team principal, Christian Horner, with whom relations had deteriorated to such an extent that it prompted Red Bull to alter their course after 2 decades of collaboration. In fact, as mentioned earlier, we have participated in many races so far where we were trying drastic configurations, showing that we didn't have the situation under control and didn't really know what to do. Laurent, with his strong engineering background, asks the engineers the right, sensible questions, and this works really well. The world champion also said that some things we tried gave us insight into the direction to follow, and this is what we've kept focusing on. Already at Zandvoort, we achieved progress that appeared to be effective, and here at Monza we took another step forward, which provided me with even more positive feelings. This is a substantial statement, not merely because it directly challenges Horner, but because it demonstrates that the genuine issue with Red Bull 2025 is not solely technical, but also managerial. Mekies is rebuilding a method, bringing engineering and common sense back to the center of Red Bull. With the Monza race, it doesn't mean that Red Bull is back to being the car to beat. McLaren keeps its lead, and West Hamper knows this well, so the big choice to swap Horner for Laurent Mekies seems to have put Red Bull on the right track. In 2026, there will also be a change in the engine, which will greatly affect them, probably disadvantaging them. However, there's a fact Max, after months of criticism, has regained confidence in the project. This is indeed a significant indication, as it signifies that Max Verstappen intends to remain with Red Bull under this organizational structure. However, let's also discuss the Williams situation, as Carlos Sainz is set to appeal the incident that transpired with Liam Lawson during the Dutch Grand Prix. Let's delve deeper into the specifics of this matter. On Friday, September 12th at precisely 3:30 p.m., the stewards are scheduled to convene through a video conference to thoroughly assess the appeal submitted by Williams concerning the 10-second penalty that was levied on the Spanish driver. Indeed, at the first turn in Zandvoort, Carlos Sainz and Liam Lawson came into contact. The race stewards attributed the fault to the Spanish driver, as they believed he did not possess the entitlement to the racing line and should have entirely lifted off. From here, the penalty that sparked debate because it is interpreted as a particularly strict application of the FIA guidelines. The current rules state that if a driver on the inside reaches the apex ahead, they have the right to the racing line and are not obliged to leave space. Nevertheless, in the particular instance of Zandvoort, the race stewards evaluated that Carlos Sainz was not sufficiently far ahead. Thus, the contact was adjudged to be his responsibility, irrespective of Liam Lawson's oversteer. Williams is contesting this issue. The team says more clarity is needed because interpretations change too often, leaving drivers unsure about how much they can push in competitive duels. What will happen on September 12th? The FIA hearing will be divided into 2 phases. In the first phase, they will verify if Williams has brought forward new significant evidence that was not available at the time of the decision. And it is a stipulation detailed in Article 14.3 of the International Sporting Code. During the second phase, but only if the initial phase is deemed favorable, the incident will undergo a re-examination based on its merits, and the penalty will be reassessed. However, insiders are skeptical, as the available footage was already complete, making it unlikely that any truly new elements will emerge. Even if the penalty were reduced or annulled, the outcome wouldn't change the Grand Prix standings, but the symbolic and regulatory value would be significant. And in my opinion, this issue goes beyond the 10-second penalty. The real topic is the FIA's consistency in wheel-to-wheel duels. In recent years, we have seen opposite decisions in similar situations. Sometimes the driver on the inside is protected, other times not. Williams is not aiming to overturn a result, but to push the FIA to establish clearer criteria, and that is a crucial point. Drivers require a clear understanding of the limits they can push without incurring a penalty. In my personal view, Sainz may have pushed excessively, yet the penalty appears overly severe when compared to other recent incidents that were not penalized. And this is the real problem, the inconsistency. If the FIA does not intervene, the risk is that every duel becomes a regulatory roulette, and this undermines the spectacle just as much as a contact on the track. And this discussion will be crucial because it will also determine the contacts we will see in the future. If they were to remove the 10-second penalty for Sainz, it means that his maneuver was not incorrect and that new evidence has emerged that absolves him of responsibility. Furthermore, in that particular situation, the penalty ought not to have been imposed on Ozon either. He experienced an oversteer and made contact with Sainz, yet penalizing Sainz appears overly excessive to me. However, we will see what the Federation decides on September 12th. Let's conclude by talking about Stefano Domenicali, who has expressed himself negatively regarding the admission of a new team. Formula One will not go beyond the 11 teams already planned with the arrival of Cadillac in 2026. This was clearly reiterated by Stefano Domenicali, president and CEO of Liberty Media, emphasizing how the circus has now reached its logistical and commercial limit. Domenicali has ventured to say, "We will only consider an offer of great significance because we have already reached a point where there is no more space." From a logistical standpoint, we are at the limit, we receive many requests, and the same happens to the teams. For this reason, we must be prudent and protect what we have built. And he additionally mentioned that with Andretti, we did not observe the essential substance. However, with General Motors, we acknowledged a substantial investment and a comprehensive 10-year plan. For this reason, we expressed a favorable opinion, and the real issue remains the division of the revenues. With 12 teams, the pie would remain the same size, but with more slices. For this reason, Formula One and the existing manufacturers do not want to further expand the number of teams. However, Domenicali leaves a possibility open. If an irresistible offer were to come, the door might reopen. In my perspective, Domenicali's stance is quite pragmatic, restricting access aids and safeguarding the value of the existing teams and guarantees financial stability. However, obviously, one must not block all entities that want to enter Formula One because otherwise there is a risk of not enriching the championship. With Cadillac making its way and Audi already confirmed, the paddock is abuzz with excitement, and I dare say it feels quite full already. The message is unmistakably clear. Either you are an automotive giant or you simply do not gain entry. This is the future of Formula One, which is becoming more exclusive and more selective. A choice that makes sense from a business perspective, but less so from a sporting perspective. Let me know your thoughts in the comments on all the topics we discussed in the video. I'm eager to read and respond to everyone. As always, I kindly remind you to leave a like, subscribe, and activate notifications so you won't miss any upcoming videos on the channel here from Las